The next morning, my son asked me to move out of my own bedroom, not because I had every other morning for the past 30 years. Because I had finally made a decision. The coffee was brewing. A year after Thomas passed away, through the kitchen window. I had been surviving painting instead warm of living. Lines across the every old day wooden table. I convinced myself to stay quiet. I was spreading homemade strawberry jam on toast. Peace. When Daniel walked in with his wife, peace was no longer my priority. Him. Respect he didn't look at me immediately. I walked downstairs while the house was still silent. Instead, the coffee maker hummed into his coffee as I placed my favorite rested her hand on her where it had always belonged. Wearing the careful smile everything else back. When they're about to ask for something, they already handmade cookie box. The family photographs Ava had finally from the hallway. Can we talk for a minute? Every item returned to its proper place. Of course, it wasn't about decoration anymore. It was a reminder about the baby's to myself. I nodded. This was still my home. Babies need plenty of space. 5:30 a.m. His shoulders relaxed. I picked up my phone, thinking I already agreed. The first person I called was Linda Parker. Really be better for us. Linda had been my closest friend for over 25 years. We can fit the crib, most changing table, rocking chair, everything in the county. Ava answered immediately. The guest room is actually very cozy. Okay? It would be putting my house on the market. Perfect for me. The words floated across the kitchen like tiny needles. I've never been more serious. The room where my late husband Thomas and I had spent 34 years together. 7 o'clock. The room where we laughed, bring everything, argued, dreamed. She didn't ask held questions. Each other through cancer treatments. Good friends know when explanations. The room where I held his hand until after his last breath. I made one more phone call. The bigger room. This time to my attorney. I didn't raise my voice. She had handled every legal document my husband and I had ever signed. If that's what you both think is best, I said calmly. Daniel let out a relieved breath. My estate plan today. I knew you'd understand. I'll clear my schedule. Ava smiled wider than she had in months. I also want every legal protection available. We just want what's best for everyone. Pause. Everyone. Has something happened? Funny how that word usually meant everyone. I'll explain in person. By the time I finished breakfast, they left to visit a baby furniture showroom. 7:05. I quietly carried my coffee upstairs. Pulled into the driveway. I stood inside my carrying a leather folder and a measuring glasses still rested on the nightstand through the kitchen window. His favorite old sweater still hung behind the bedroom door. My real estate agent. Because I couldn't bring myself to move it. What for? I gently touched the buttered another slice of toast with his own hands. First, 20 years earlier. Ava came downstairs a minute later. Had a memory. The moment she saw Linda walking around the yard taking pictures. The color drained from her face. Strange. Margaret, one of my framed family photographs, sounded unusually nervous. I searched the hallway. Why is a realtor outside? There it was, placed inside the guest room, without anyone asking me. Without either of them could ask another question. Someone had already started the driveway. I stood there for several seconds carrying a large wooden sign. Then I quietly placed the picture back where it belonged. What are you doing? That evening, I began noticing other things. He looked confused. Favorite leather chair had disappeared from the living room. The workers simply casually. We're just following the owner's instructions. The old family clock the word had been harder than I expected. A few minutes later, it didn't match the new decorations. The sign stood proudly in the front yard. Even my favorite coffee mugs had stared at it like someone had punched him. They looked outdated. He rushed back inside. Little by little. Mom. The house no longer looked like mine. Why is our house for sale? Not because they forced me. I looked directly into his eyes. Because they replaced me one quiet decision at a time. This is my house. Weeks earlier, the kitchen fell silent. Myself they meant Ava's hands instinctively wrapped around her stomach. That night, after dinner, be serious. I walked past the nursery catalog lying open on the dining table. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. The room in every picture looked exactly like my bedroom. Dad always said this house would stay in the family. The same wall measurements. It is staying in the family. The same layout. I'm family. They weren't planning anymore. He opened his mouth but couldn't answer. Later, everyone went upstairs. When your father and I bought behind home, washing dishes. The mortgage was approved. When I finally climbed into bed, sleep refused I made the down payment. The house was old. I paid every installment. The heating vents has always carried one name. Floors. Around midnight, Daniel looked I heard footsteps downstairs. Then voices. I didn't know. I know because Ava never asked. At first I ignored them. Suddenly then I heard my own name. But we've been living here. She agreed easier than I expected. We're expecting a baby. Ava laughed quietly. And babies need stability. She did. They do. I still feel bad. Then how can you do this? Get over it. I looked at her calmly. Then Ava spoke again. The better question is, once how could you ask a widow to leave her own bedroom? Everything else becomes much easier. Daniel was heavier than any argument. You really think so? Linda knocked gently before entering. What about later? Several documents on the kitchen table. She's living mostly downstairs or maybe somewhere assisted. Everything. She stopped. Daniel looked at the paperwork. Daniel finished the sentence himself. What is all this? The house won't be a problem. He looked back at me. Neither of them laughed. You've already decided? Neither of them sounded guilty. I decided last night. They sounded Ava's voice grew louder. This is because of one bedroom? As if they discussed this I slowly shook my head. Then Ava spoke the sentence because of every little thing before the bedroom. We just have to make sure she doesn't decide to sell it my family photos. My kitchen. My heart stopped. My memories. Why would I sell my own room overnight? Unless
you erased me
they
one
already
piece at a
believed
time.
It belonged to them.
Daniel lowered his head.
I slowly sat upright
For the first
in bed.
time since
For the
his
first
father
time
died.
since Thomas
He
passed
couldn't
away
look me in
nearly
the
a year
eyes.
ago.
Linda quietly
The
slid a
sadness
tent across the
disappeared.
table. Whenever you're ready.
Something colder replaced
Without
it.
hesitation.
Something
I
much
signed
clearer.
every page.
I suddenly
Margaret
remembered
Collins,
the conversation
owner,
Thomas and I
had shared
seller,
only days before he
decision
died.
made.
Daniel
watched
my
my
hand
signature
weekly
appear
and
on each
whispered,
document.
"Promise
His
me
hands
one
trembled.
thing.
Mom,
What is it?
please.
No
There has
matter
to be
what
another
happens,
way.
There
Never
was.
let anyone pressure
It
you
lasted
into giving
11
away
months.
this house.
Ava
I
suddenly
laughed
stood
back
up.
then.
If you sell
Who
this
would do
house,
that?
we'll have nowhere to
He
go.
looked at me with tired eyes.
I folded the papers
People
neatly.
change when money gets involved.
I think that's something you should
I
have
promised
considered
him.
before
Back
planning
then,
where I was going
I thought
to
he
sleep.
was simply worried about my
Neither
future.
of them had an answer.
Now,
Linda gathered
I
the
realized
signed
he had
documents.
seen something I hadn't.
I'll begin scheduling
because there was
viewings
one
this
detail
afternoon.
Daniel had apparently forgotten.
After she left, Daniel
One
quietly
detail
walked
Ava never
outside.
bothered checking.
He stood in front
The
of the
house
for
wasn't
sale sign for
inherited.
nearly 10 minutes
It wasn't
without
shared.
moving. It wasn't
Inside,
waiting for Daniel
I washed
someday.
the breakfast dishes
It had
as
always
if nothing
belonged to
unusual
only one
had
person.
happened.
Me.
But something
Every
unusual
mortgage
had
payment,
happened.
every
For the
property
first
tax,
time in months,
every insurance
I
renewal,
felt free.
every legal
Yet
document.
I couldn't ignore
one
one
name,
question.
mine. Why
I
had they
slowly
become
walked to
so
the filing
desperate?
cabinet
This
inside
wasn't
my
just
study.
about wanting a
I
larger
unlocked
bedroom.
the bottom drawer.
There was something
Inside
else.
sat a thick blue folder.
Something they
Pretty
weren't
deed.
telling me.
I
And
opened
later
it
that
carefully.
same afternoon,
There it was.
exactly
Pure
as I
accident
remembered
revealed
the
owner,
secret.
Margaret Collins.
As I walked past
Only
Daniel's
one
office
signature.
door, I heard
Only
him
one
whisper
owner.
into his phone. I smiled for the
Please,
first time in months.
just give me another
Not
month.
because I wanted
I'll
revenge.
have the money.
Because I finally
I
understood
promise.
something.
A deep
They
voice
thought they were
answered
loudly
slowly
enough
moving
for
me
me to
out.
hear through
They
the
had no
half-open
idea.
door. You've already
They were
missed
the ones
3
standing
payments.
on borrowed ground.
No more excuses.
I carefully closed the folder,
If we don't
locked
get
the
our money
cabinet,
by next month,
turned off the study
we'll collect
light,
it another way.
and before going to sleep,
Daniel's face turned completely
I picked
pale.
up my phone.
He whispered,
At exactly 5:30
I understand.
tomorrow morning.
The call ended.
I planned to make a phone
quietly
call
stepped
that would
away
change
before
every
he noticed
single
me.
life inside this
Now
house.
everything finally
Forever.
made sense. They didn't just want my bedroom. They didn't just want my house, they needed it. And whatever debt my son had fallen into, it was far bigger and far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid, because my heart was torn in two. Part of me was still a mother who wanted to protect her son. The other part finally understood that protecting him had slowly become permission for him to make one terrible decision after another. By sunrise, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to rescue Daniel from the consequences of choices he had made in secret. The following afternoon, I met my attorney, Rebecca Hayes. She carefully listened as I explained everything. The bedroom, the conversations I'd overheard, the mysterious debt, the threatening phone call. When I finished, she closed her notebook and looked at me. Margaret, your son isn't after your bedroom. I know, he's trying to save himself. She nodded. And people under financial pressure often convince themselves that someone else's property is already theirs. She pulled several documents from a folder. I recommend updating your will immediately. I already planned to. And one more thing. She leaned forward. If anyone tries to question your mental fitness after you list the house, we'll already be prepared. I frowned. You think they'd go that far? Rebecca answered quietly. I've seen families fight over far less. That afternoon, I completed every legal document, a new will, a living trust, medical directives. Everything was locked securely under my name. No confusion, no loopholes, no assumptions. When I returned home, the atmosphere had completely changed. Daniel hardly spoke. Ava spent most of the evening on her phone, whispering behind closed doors. Then, 3 days later, fate handed me the final piece of the puzzle. I stopped by the grocery store to buy fresh vegetables. As I turned into the cereal aisle, I heard Ava's voice. She was talking on her phone. If she sells the house before we refinance anything, we're finished. I froze. She continued. The investors already threatened Daniel. Another pause. I know, but if his mother signs the property over first, we can borrow against it. My stomach tightened, so that was the plan. Not a nursery, not a bedroom. The house itself, every kind smile, every polite conversation, every suggestion about what was best. It had all been leading here. I quietly stepped around the corner. Ava nearly dropped her phone when she saw me. Her face turned white. Margaret. I smiled politely. I didn't realize grocery stores had such thin walls. She couldn't say a word. I placed a carton of milk into my shopping cart. Then I looked directly into her eyes. You should never build your future on something that doesn't belong to you. Without waiting for a response, I walked away. For the first time, she looked genuinely frightened. The house received several strong offers within the week. A young couple named Ethan and Lily fell in love with it. The moment they saw the handcrafted staircase Thomas had built years ago, they weren't looking for an investment. They wanted a home. I accepted their offer the very same afternoon. When Daniel came home from work, I asked him and Ava to sit down at the dining table. They both looked exhausted. I placed 3 folders in front of them. Daniel opened the first one, the property deed. His eyes slowly filled with tears. I never knew. No, I replied softly. You never bothered to know. He opened the second folder, the finalized sales agreement. The house had officially been sold. His shoulders collapsed. Then came the third folder. He looked confused. What is this? A trust fund. For your baby. Both Daniel and Ava looked up. I've set aside part of the sale for my grandchild's education. The money can't be touched. It can't pay debts. It can't be borrowed. It belongs only to that child. Ava blinked in disbelief. You're still helping us? I gently shook my head. No, I'm helping an innocent child. The choices you made are yours. The future of my grandchild is not. Daniel finally broke down. I'm sorry, Mom. I was ashamed. I borrowed money trying to keep my business alive. When everything failed, I panicked. I thought if we inherited the house. He couldn't finish the sentence. Tears rolled down his face. I became someone Dad would never recognize. I reached across the table and held his hand. Your father wouldn't judge you for failing. He'd judge you for lying. Daniel nodded through his tears. I know. I've known for a long time. Ava remained silent. For once, there were no excuses, no blame, no clever explanations. Only regret. A month later, I moved into a smaller cottage across town. It had 2 bedrooms, a small garden, a front porch where the morning sun arrived before breakfast. It was peaceful. More importantly, it was mine. Daniel and Ava rented a modest apartment. Daniel took a second job to repay every dollar he owed. Slowly, painfully, he began rebuilding his life the honest way. When my grandson was born, Daniel called me first. His voice cracked with emotion. Mom, would you come meet him? I arrived at the hospital an hour later. The tiny boy wrapped his fingers around mine. In that moment, every ounce of anger disappeared. Children don't inherit the mistakes of adults. They deserve better. Months passed. Daniel visited every Sunday. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we simply shared coffee on my porch. One afternoon he quietly handed me something. It was my late husband's old tape measure. I've been carrying this every day, he said. It reminds me that real men build things. They don't take them. I smiled. Your father would have liked hearing that. As he stood to leave, he stopped at the garden gate. Mom? Yes? Thank you for not giving me the house. I looked at him for a long moment. If I had, you would have lost far more than a home. He nodded. I know. Then he walked away. Not as the frightened man who once believed he deserved everything, but as a son finally learning that the strongest foundations are built with honesty, responsibility, and respect. And every morning, as I sat on my porch with a warm cup of coffee, I silently thanked Thomas for the advice he gave me all those years ago. Because he wasn't protecting a house, he was protecting my dignity. And sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't leaving someone an inheritance. It's teaching them that respect can never be inherited. It must be earned.